I'm sure, like many of you, you've been looking at the impact of the decision to sell off some of the assets of the Forestry Commission. We're still not quite certain how many, what percentage, over what timescale, under what conditions. All of that will be revealed. But lurking behind this is the readiness of DEFRA basically to play the Treasury line here and to go along with a short-term route to asset disposal with a view to making life a lot easier for the Treasury around some of these issues. What goes with that? What do we lose as we transfer assets held in public hands to private ownership? Does it really matter? It's the view of DEFRA that it doesn't matter at all. As long as private owners manage those assets in as responsible and sustainable way as they're managed today by the Forestry Commission, no problem. No problem. And they are out there at the moment advocating precisely that approach. They have not cleared that with Treasury. It is perfectly clear that the Forestry Commission will be mandated to sell those forests at the best possible price in terms of the benefits to the taxpayer, and that means the opportunity to impose upon those assets as they move out of the public sector into the private sector, to impose some kind of conditionality, some kind of mandate about what needs to happen to those assets will not exist. Because every time you put one of those mandates on the use of that land in perpetuity, then obviously the sale price is diminished. So for Treasury, this is a very simple story. Sell those assets as fast as you can, because that's what we need right now, and forget the rest. So, multifunctional forestry as a concept for the UK may survive, let's hope, in Scotland and Wales. Will it survive in England? It may, but it's not going to be as easy to demonstrate what that really means as it used to be. So, I guess I'm trying to say that I think we're in for a very difficult time here. I think that some of these concerns about sustainable land use will get to be pretty sharp, controversial, and difficult during the course of the next 5 to 10 years. I've talked primarily here about the planning aspects of landscape rather than the natural forces that shape landscape. But it has to be said that if you read the UK Climate Impacts report on the impact of accelerating climate change on landscapes in the UK, you do come to a very disturbing set of images about what is likely to happen. So, my final conclusion really, before we move to a wider debate, is that I am concerned at the moment that we have a somewhat complacent view about the role of land use planning for a sustainable future. I'm concerned that those who think we can embrace a multiplicity of different land use purposes in a happy, kind of integrated, coherent framework may have completely misunderstood the kind of pressures that are going to come down the track at us. For me, that raises the importance of landscape and land use rather than diminishes it, and therefore any reduction in capacity inside our government systems to handle these complex and controversial decisions, I think, is going to be very painful indeed. I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Jonathon, can I say firstly thank you very, very much for a very stimulating opening address. I think you very usefully set us a timescale that we can think about this evening. I don't think any of us had this in mind at the start, but that timescale of 2050 seems a very logical timescale to be thinking about. You made some very interesting comments about geoengineering, and I recall the fact that when Max Nicholson was on Desert Island Discs, he was asked at the time what was going wrong with the world, and he said it was macro technology. So you're very much in the same line of thinking, obviously, to Max in that respect. What Max brought to the debate was really an ability, that incredible ability that both you and Richard referred to, of being able to link all the elements that create the landscape of Britain. He brought his own particular dimension, ornithology and ecology, into the mould. But it struck me that we've got on our panel tonight representatives who cover this whole spectrum, from the heritage through to the way that we manage our natural resources, to the way which as individuals we come together in different types of organisations like CPRE to campaign for what matters. And although you painted a gloomy picture, which I'm not going for a moment to disagree with, there is a sort of underlying sense that people are determined to try and make something better for their future. But what we're going to do now is really to take that very, very stimulating and sometimes provocative address. I didn't realise you were a Tory before you started. And we're going to ask each of our panellists first just to give us a 2-minute commentary from their own perspective. So that'll take us about 10 minutes. Then we're going to switch to our full debate and discussion. The only rules that I'd like to set up at this stage are that anybody who wishes to speak will just raise a hand. And when you're selected, please would you just say, firstly, the name, the organisation you're representing, and then indicate, depending on where we've got to in our debate, whether you want to make a statement, in other words, something entirely new, or whether you want to ask a question, or whether you want to respond to something that's already said, just so that we can get some continuity in the way that the discussion goes. So I'm going to turn immediately to Fiona and ask you, in a way, part reaction, but also what you would like to get across as the key message in 2 minutes.
A book jumped into my mind. It wasn't the Foresight book, Jonathon. It was a book that changed my life. When I was at university, it was W.G. Hoskins' The Making of the English Landscape, written in 1955 at a time when he, for the first time, and let's forget it was the first time, put together geography, history, human impact on the landscape, and localism. It was a powerful voice for localism, and connected those disciplines. And in the 1950s, you could see the millennia written through the landscape, this idea of the palimpsest. And what's absolutely remarkable is when I found that book in 1976 in Heifers in Cambridge, you could still see that same sense. You could differentiate the Lake District from Bodmin and East Anglia from Staffordshire, Stoke. And in 2010, we can still do it. And I think the question is, will in 2050 we be able to still do that? Because that, for me, is what landscape is. It's that complex interaction of human activity with function, with natural and underpinning resource, but also with aspiration. Because it's above all not static, it's not trying to stop change, but it is saying very powerfully, if we change, and we will change, we change without destroying that story. And that was his great vision, and it's motivated enormous numbers of us, and I know it motivated Mark Lintell, who is a dear friend of mine, and who I'm here to celebrate tonight, along with Max. I think the challenge for us, and I totally agree with Jonathon, is that the concept of localism, which was absolutely fundamental to Hoskins' book, can only exist within a framework. And at the moment, we don't see where that framework is coming from. Now, for me, we can have a light framework. I think we do need a lighter framework than we've had. But I think that framework needs to encompass CAP reform, the farming land basis of land use management. It needs to encompass planning for sure, and I'm sure Neil will go into that more. It needs to encompass this new idea of ecosystem services and recognising the value of the clean water, of the carbon, of all the resources in the soil and in the land that we are not currently conscious of and managing well. And then finally, and above all, the most important thing, we need to reconnect people with the land. Because it's people who have the skills, it's people who shape the landscape, it's people who love the landscape and use the landscape. And the only basis, as far as I'm concerned, that in 2050 we could have any confidence that we will still have that ability to recognise that long story is if, and we do see signs of it, and we've done quite well actually since the depredations of the 70s and 80s and 90s, in relearning some of the skills of land management, of localism, of passion for the particular way you lay a hedgerow in Gloucestershire as opposed to in Yorkshire, or a stone wall, or manage a hay meadow, or build local buildings. And if we don't reconnect people, we don't stand a chance.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Thank you.